Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times best-selling author of The Horse Boy, founder of New Trails Learning Systems and LongRideHome.com. You can find details of all our programs and shows on rupertisaacson.com. Here on Equine Assisted World, we look at the cutting edge and the best practices currently being developed and established in the equine assisted field. This can be psychological, this can be neuropsych, this can be physical, this can be all of the conditions that human beings have that these lovely equines, these beautiful horses that we work with, help us with. Thank you for being part of the adventure, and we hope you enjoy today's show. In the following podcast, I had a long chat with my dear friend, Joell Dunlap of Square Peg Foundation in California. For those of you who don't know this amazing person, Joell, about 15 years ago, she founded an organization dedicated to the people that don't fit into mainstream society and how to help them learn skills and learn to thrive using horses. She was really one of the first people to pioneer this work. Now she works in the fields of autism, trauma, neuropsych, other types of mental health. And she has two facilities, one in Half Moon Bay, just south of San Francisco, and one in Sonoma, just east of San Francisco in the wine country. And she works all over the world and educates people all over the world in this amazing work. She combines neuroscience with really good classical horse training. She provides employment for people with neuropsychiatric conditions. And she provides basically happiness and joy and the tools to thrive. So without further ado, let's find out how Joell Dunlap does this. Welcome to Equine Assisted World. This is the first one.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I have been wanting to do this for the longest time. And so that's why I'm excited. For about the last 4 or 5 years, I've just, I think along with everyone else who's working in the field, has watched it suddenly go from a rather tight, perhaps overregulated, perhaps somewhat limited field and a rather factional field to suddenly a really wide open field. And I think what I and many like us have noticed is that a lot of people who were quietly working away for more than years, I'd say decades, their work has now proved itself, and people are now doing studies into them. It's reaching academia, and so much of what was on the hippie margins has now, in about the last 5 years, come to the mainstream. But it's still a somewhat confusing world in that, well, there seems to be the equine assisted thing, there seems to be the neuropsych thing, there seems to be the physical disabilities thing, and many others. And these seem to be existing still to some degree in their own galaxies. But there are a growing number of people out there who see the bigger picture. And as we're realizing now, so many people have multiple diagnoses. So many people, they might have something physical, but they've got something neuropsychological going on. They could have trauma and something physical. Perhaps they've come back from a war zone and they're injured. They could have many multiple layers to a lesser or greater degree. And suddenly the technologies available seem to me to be rising to meet this challenge. And I would say that of the people that I have been watching over the past more than a decade be just consistently effective would be Joell Dunlap of Square Peg Foundation in California. So Joell, I've got you finally in front of me. I'm sitting in Germany. You're sitting there. I want you to tell us who you are and what you do. And then I want to ask you a bunch of questions so that the listeners can get an insight into the multifaceted world that you work in and perhaps get some ideas about how they might explore this world as well. So who are you, Joell?
I am the co-founder and executive director of Square Peg Foundation. We started in 2004 And we called it Square Peg because we saw a real gap between people who wouldn't thrive in a traditional riding environment and people who also weren't going to fit in what at the time in 2004 was a therapeutic riding environment. And we saw a bunch of people who weren't going to be served well in either environment. And of course, what found us in that space is autism, over and over and over again. But our first partner when we started Square Peg was a family homeless shelter in San Francisco in the Tenderloin, in the roughest part of the city. And they had a really beautiful way of looking at the homeless issue, that they wanted to create an environment of family rituals and joy and an experience through the eyes of the child, so that the recidivism in homelessness wasn't repeated generation after generation after generation. And that mentorship was so timely and so helpful to us because it helped us understand the importance of environment, and the importance of changing the way somebody saw themselves. And that is a program called Raphael House Family Homeless Shelter. And when you think of a homeless shelter, you don't think of hopefulness and you don't think of sweetness. And here's a place where the children, they all read a bedtime story and then lit a candle and then sang their ways back to their rooms to go to bed and create these rituals of safety and of sweetness. We learned a lot from them. So here we are in 2023. In 2018, we opened up our first satellite organization. So here we are. We've been operating for 16 years and loved what we were doing. Didn't know how it would scale. This is Silicon Valley and everybody wants to talk about scalability of operations. And we didn't plan it this way. The story that I'll share, because I think it's interesting just in talking about how things grow naturally. We had a woman working for us, Becca Knopf, very, 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 very talented. And if you had a nickel for every resume of every college girl coming out of college who says, I want to work for a Horseboy Foundation or I want to work for Square Peg, we could probably buy a pretty fancy latte. But Becca sent that resume and showed up for her first day to volunteer. And within an hour, she was wearing a tutu and was back riding. And we thought, okay, we have a keeper. So Becca also wanted to pursue excellence in being a competition dressage rider. So she worked for us 4 days a week. And then she commuted an hour and a half north up to Sonoma to ride with a Grand Prix dressage trainer 3 days a week. She was working 7 days a week. And this woman was a mentor to her personally and professionally. And that woman, Susan Palmer, went from diagnosis to gone from breast cancer in 4 months, 4 very brutal, short months. And it was devastating for Becca and for her barn community, and certainly for her family. And so her widower came to Becca and said, look, I need you to take over the barn. I need you to run the barn for me. So she came to us crying and said, I need to honor Susan and I need to quit working for Square Peg and I need to go and run Cadence Farm up in Sonoma. And we gave her our blessing and hugs and a going away party. And off she went. And about 6 weeks later, she called me and said, can we have dinner? And I said, well, of course. So she drives an hour and a half south and we order dinner and she starts crying. She says, I don't want to run a dressage barn. And I said, well, what do you want to do? She said, I want Square Peg. I need Square Peg in my life. And I said, well, and this is a very Rupert-esque answer. I said, well, let's just turn Cadence Farm into a Square Peg satellite. And she said, can we do that? And I said, I had no idea, but I have this napkin under my glass of wine and I'm sure someone will lend us a pen and we started penciling out or penning out how it would work. And that's how our satellite operation opened. So we did prove that we could scale it, and we did prove that we could grow, and that we could go into a new community and get the trust of the autism community there, and start services.
So
So
you've just said some things which for a lot of people in the equine therapy world would seem to be completely dissonant things. You said in this last couple of minutes, you've said homelessness, you've said about family rituals of joy, safety, and sweetness. You've said autism. You've said Grand Prix dressage. How do all these things come together, Joell?
pretty naturally, right?
Talk us through it.
Well, I think the important thing is joy and curiosity and exploration. The best of dressage is just that, right? It's partnership, and it's joyfulness. And if it's not joyfulness, you certainly see it and you feel it. And that connection that we seek with the horse when we seek excellence in horsemanship is always going to be about joy and curiosity and communication and ritual, right? Horses, they love a good ritual. They love to know what's coming.
That's true.
They love that predictability. And you certainly learn that in the autism world. If you can create a joyful place, but that it's so unpredictable, sometimes that's destabilizing. And so bringing it back to beautiful ritual that feels like home, that feels like safety, it all fits in.
Now, for many people in the horse world who look at dressage a little bit askance, they equate it with the word stressage. It's never good enough. It's a bit snooty and so on. How does dressage and autism / special needs / equine assisted work come together? What's the connection?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is rhythm, right? If we look at the training scale, rhythm, we're born to a rhythm. The music that we listen to is directly connected to heart rates, a heart rate of when we feel good, a heart rate of when we feel excited, and also our gait. We love rhythm. We are creatures of rhythm, and horses as well, when they feel good, are creatures of rhythm. When we're rhythmically moving, again, we're creating that joy and that predictability. You don't have to be a musician to be able to find the one, right? The one is home in rhythm. And I think, what I'm seeing in dressage lately, and even in jumping, is people understanding rhythm and understanding biomechanics so much more. They're understanding that when a horse is compressed in his neck and he's compressed in his back, that it is stressage, right? And we feel it and we see it. And the rhythm is the first thing that goes out the window. So when, I can get lost in the woods on this. Just trying to come back.
Lead us into the woods. Lead us into the woods. I love it.
So, finding that regulating rhythm, it feels good. And
why does the rhythm feel good? Let me nail you on that one. So we're assuming that we've got a horse that's not stressage, that we've got a horse that's relaxed. And I'm going to ask you how you achieve this in a moment. But how does this rhythm, beyond a certain predictability, do good to a human?
The other night, my husband and I went out to go see live music for the first time in a long time, between just the habits that we all built during the COVID shutdowns and the fear of being in groups. And we saw the Blind Boys of Alabama, which are 3 old men singing spiritual music with a funky backbeat. And it had been so long since I'd seen music with a group, and you realize that everybody's breathing and their foot tapping and their head bobbing had all synced up. And you think about any healing tradition, any tribal tradition, it's all based around being in a circle and syncing up in rhythm generally through song and dance and drumming and whatever that takes. And that's the best of who we are. So why wouldn't we seek that for anybody who's feeling dysregulated? Why wouldn't we go there first?
And is that what you're trying to achieve with the horses? And if so, how are you doing it?
Well, that's the ideal.
How are you
right?
getting the softness? Like talk me through it.
Well, the softness, there has to be some trust between the horse and the person. And we're all now learning how quick horses are to size us up, of whether or not we're trustworthy. And so ideally, the person working with the horse knows well, but that's not always totally possible. And spending a lot of time, whether you want to call it training or working with the horse and seeking that rhythm and praising for that rhythm.
And how are you doing that? Are you doing that from the saddle or are you doing that from the ground?
We spend a lot of time on the ground. We spend a lot of time, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it was through you and Ileana that we were introduced to the work of the Valenza family, and they moved us so far forward in the in-hand work. So much can be accomplished from the ground, and working on the ground will make you a better rider. And there's if I could bring one message to the equine group, I'd like that to be known. What you can do on the lunge, what you can do from the ground, and giving the horse that visual feedback. They're not as visual as we think they are, but they're still quite visual. And when we're on the horse, when we're riding, they don't get that visual feedback that they're going to get if we have someone on the ground, whether it's lunging or doing in-hand work.
So you mentioned the Valenzas there, you mentioned in-hand. And I was going to get to mentors in a minute, and you talk about your mentors. So you've talked about Raphael House. Mm-hmm. You mentioned now the Valenzas, who, for those people who are listening, the Valenza family in Portugal, Luis Valenza is regarded, I would say, perhaps I think you'd agree with this, as probably the greatest living exponent of classical, Baroque dressage, probably alive on the planet. Currently, it seems that there's a consensus among the dressage community about this. And I know him, obviously you do too. And one of the things that comes across is his humanity. But of course, he doesn't really travel outside of Portugal much to teach. So when you say the Valenza family, can you talk us through who from that family has been training you and your team? How have they been training you? And how's that made a difference?
Gosh. So Luis has 3 daughters. The youngest daughter, Sophia, travels extensively. I think she's in New Zealand as we speak. I think she teaches in at least 4 and maybe 5 different languages. I think she can teach in Polish as well, which is just amazing. And then her traveling partner and co-trainer, Gonzalo Linush, the two of them have been coming out. I think the first time I met them was at your place in Elgin, and I'm so bad at timelines. That was probably 8-9 years ago.
It was the Pleistocene, I think. I think when Mastodon still bellowed to Mastodon across the primeval swamp. I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and you left me a very nice mastodon to ride. I appreciate it.
Yes, the mastodons have a beautiful sense of rhythm, really.
Really, really rhythmic.
It's a shame they're not around anymore. Yeah.
It is. So, and then I think it was 2018, I was able to go to Portugal and spend a week at the Valenzas, and we had 2 days of terrible rain and windstorms that were so bad. Even in their covered school, there was water running down the hill and rushing, and here's Master Valenza with a giant push broom and trying to move the water, and it didn't work. And so, in true Portuguese tradition, we all just went back to the house and ate lunch for hours and hours and hours, and which they were going to do anyway. But he was gracious enough to let me interview him for about 3 hours until all of the batteries ran out, and just spending that intimate time with him. The first question I asked him, just as kind of a warm up, was, what did you have for breakfast? And he spins it into this philosophical, beautiful treatise on Bochet, what a joy, right? So yeah, that mentorship has been such a gift.
What would you say it's done? You say in terms of providing rhythm and softness and a well-being through that,
Mm.
through for the people that you serve. What would you say it's for your horses?
Mm-hmm. Well, and we haven't even touched on Joelle's particular brand of insanity.
We're going to, believe me, because people need to know your particular brand of insanity, because they will go WTF and I'll go yuck. Yeah. So yes, we'll go to the insanity in a minute. What's it done for this insane crew?
They're sweet. They're sweet, 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 and soft. And these are horses that generally come in with not just tension, but some gnarly injuries, bone-on-bone injuries, muscle imbalances from their field of expertise and what they've been bred for hundreds of years to do. They just get soft.
Soft in the body, soft in the brain, not like me, soft in the brain, but you know what I mean? Soft in the, like, gosh, I'm just digging a hole for myself. But the softness, emotional as well as,
okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you have any speculation onto why that might be? What's going on with this in-hand work that creates this?
There's a lot of balancing in the body. There's a lot of finding. Horses in a natural setting will not very often cross their legs over the midline unless they're particularly scared. But very often we find that when a horse with his hind leg steps underneath his center of gravity with one hind leg and moves and bends in his body, he starts deepening his breath. He starts to lengthen the outside of his body. He gets softer on the inside. And then when we consistently reward that, he starts to seek it, not just for his own self, but he seeks it in pleasing you and you being part of that herd. I've never, ever seen anything. It used to be that you would just put a horse on the end of a lunge line and run them until they're tired. And then, he'll figure it out, which does work to an extent. And it worked for me for a long time. But to change that into the horse feeling at home in his body and knowing where all his feet are and softening through his back before we put a rider on, softening through his jaw before anybody's holding a bit, they just get sweet. And that's the word that just keeps coming up.
So sweet from insane. Why are these horses coming insane? Where are they coming from, these horses that come to you?
They're race horses. Yeah. So they're bred to be fast, and there's nothing faster for, a mile to 5 miles.
So you are putting autistic people on off the track thoroughbreds. Okay. Now, some people would say that's dangerous. Some people would say, oh, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. How can this work? Why is it working? Because it clearly is working, because you've been around for 16 years. You've got another satellite here. I know that you are now under the San Mateo County medical and mental health thing, which we're going to go to in a minute. So clearly you're getting results. How can this be? Why isn't it dangerous? Because all the naysayers are going to say that's not something you should do. You shouldn't match up your thoroughbreds like with this population. So talk us through how it works.
One of the things about a thoroughbred is that he is born with humans in his life. Some of the burro courses are not handled until they're 3, 4, 5 years old. A racehorse is, he's handled at conception. The rule is you cannot artificially inseminate for a racehorse. It has to be a live cover and it has to be witnessed and certified. So humans are there from that moment of conception. And the good ones and good farms, the people handling the horses are experienced horse people. So a lot of them come quite trusting. I don't think they would run if they didn't trust, because we ask them for everything, and sometimes it costs them everything. So that's one thing. You don't have to teach a thoroughbred to want to please or trust humans, because they come that way. They've also seen a lot of things at the track, right? Bicycles are not new to them. Big tractors are not new to them. So they do, a 4-year-old horse coming off the track has seen a lot of human things.
And a lot of different locations, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's hauled in vans. He's been to sales, which isn't to say that isn't traumatic or stressful. But he has been there, done that. And the fact that he's standing in your yard means that he's survived it on some level. He's worked with a lot of veterinarians. Hopefully he's had his teeth done, and he's had some pretty good nutrition. So there's that as the lead up, but he's bred to be really, really fast. He's been ridden fairly roughly. He's been taught to lean into contact with the bridle. If there's one thing I can say about horses, period, is their ability to forgive is one of the most soul cleansing and also taxing, if you think about it. So once you start to spend time with the horse and start to get him feeling good in his body, they become so appreciative and so, gosh, I sound like a broken record, but they get sweet. I also like to illustrate in a way people can understand, the importance of environment and diet for the horses. So if a horse is at the track, we have a joke at racetrack saying that you just feed them beans and gunpowder, and then light a match and off they go. So diet and environment, right? If you bring home a border collie puppy and you live in an apartment and you go to work all day, he's probably going to chew up all your shoes and your credit cards and the walls. But if you live on a farm and he goes to work with you all day and he's moving all the time and he's with other dogs, people are going to come to your house at dinner time and say, how come your dog is so well behaved? He just sleeps over in the corner. He doesn't bother anyone. It's the same with the horses. When you create the right environment and the right diet, which helps me and my staff too, because I still like to go fast, right? So it means that the thoroughbreds, you have a reason to get them out and go find a good hill and have a proper gallop and move around a little bit, so that they can regulate. And that works for me too.
So you're saying that you're taking off the track thoroughbreds, and through a mixture of this classical in-hand work plus this natural environment, because I know I've seen your California hills that you're working on, and giving them speed when they need it, so that they, correct me if I'm wrong, so that they won't need it when they're working with your vulnerable population because they've got their jollies out, basically. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Means that you end up with a sensitive and giving horse that feels good in its body.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real beauty in what you're saying in terms of an animal that has been, if not broken, although some of them, as you say, come with injuries, in service, now being rehabbed through this work that you do to then go back into service in a way that provides it itself with well-being. There's a story to this that I'd like to unearth, which I actually myself don't know, even though I've known you for a while. Not everyone knows thoroughbreds. Not everyone would be able to do this. Let's go back to your earlies. Joell, what's your first contact with a horse in your life? How did you get into horses?
My mother's family were jockeys. Some of them very good, some of them really bad. But all of them violent drunks. And so my mother was terrified of me being anywhere near the track. And she had a rough life growing up, and she wanted to create the perfect suburban upbringing for her family, which she did. But it was always horses for me. And I can remember, I was looking at your questions before I dialed up, and I can remember being like 8 years old at the park pony ride, where everybody else is 3 or 4 years old, and I'm 8, so I'm bigger than anyone. And I'm on this pony on the little track, and I am the happiest person on the planet. I can feel it in my body. It was just bubbles everywhere. And I was so happy. I just wanted to cry. And, some squeaky little plasticky saddle that I'm sitting on some poor little pony that's going round and round in circles. And, nothing had ever made me so happy. And so whatever I needed to do to be around horses, I did, which included, working for lessons, or there were horses on the way to school in stables. And I remember stuffing sweatpants underneath my Catholic schoolgirl skirt and sneaking into the barn and sitting on their backs while they ate before school, until I got discovered, and there were
nobody caught you.
calls to the police. Yeah, well, eventually they did. But, just being on them and smelling them and being with them was all I ever wanted. And so by the time I was 18, I was galloping racehorses at the track, much to my mother's chagrin. And that was my life for, I guess, for the next 12 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you were galloping racehorses on the track from 18. I know your story, and I think it would really help listeners to know your story, because I think there's a link here into service and special needs. Something happened to you before that 18th birthday. Can you tell us that story?
Sure. I was very unexpectedly a mom at 16.
And this was where in the US did that happen?
In Sacramento, California.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was an athlete. My son's dad was also an athlete. We were both swimmers. He was into cycling. I was running track and cross country, and we were training for triathlons. I somehow thought that would act as birth control. I don't know.
That sounds like a 16-year-old, outlook.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. So, but I was very, very, very lean, which probably, between that and being 16 years old and quite stressed, contributed to the fact that Greg was born 9 weeks early. So he was a 3.5 pound baby, with a 50-50 shot of survival.
3.5 pound baby. And you're a 16-year-old mum with a premature 3.5 pound baby.
Yeah.
What are you looking at? How are people reacting to this?
I didn't have time to notice how anybody was reacting, because I was busy praying and visiting and trying to figure out how to breastfeed a baby that's on, that's being tube fed. He did marvelously. Is to this day so strong, and pulled through beautifully, and came home about a week and a half before his due date.
Joell, I've lost you. Hold on. I got you back. All right. So where I lost you is you're 16. You've got a premature baby who's come home. You're trying to figure out how to breastfeed with a baby that's on a tube. You're trying to figure this out, and you're riding racehorses at the track for a living?
No, I wasn't. I started galloping racehorses when he was about 2.5. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what all young mums do is, when their kids hit toddlerdom, they go and get jobs galloping 2-year-old thoroughbreds, which of course is not dangerous or anything. And you took no wrecks, of course, I'm sure.
No.
Never fell off, right? How do you go from this teenage mum surviving by galloping racehorses on the track, risking your life, eking out a dirt poor wage living, dealing with incredibly rough human beings, and meeting the challenges of being a single mum at a teenage. How do you put all this together?
I don't know. I don't know. I know that's really unsatisfying, but I think I realized that, I was a mom, and it was a sacred, important duty, and that I was his one person who was ultimately responsible for him. If I was dead inside, I'd have nothing to offer him. And I needed something that made me alive inside, and that was horses. And galloping racehorses is a way you get paid to have horses in your life, and you're done by 10 in the morning. Um, you know, and so I could go to school, I could have another job, I could be with my son. So, and in a way that's, for better or for worse, followed me through my life, trying to cram all these responsibilities in my life. So, I was thinking, how do I stay alive inside? How do I feed a love and a passion in me and still feed my family? And that's what I did.
So you go from galloping racehorses on the track
Mhm.
as a single mum, figuring all this out. And a certain time later in your life, you enter the therapeutic world with neurodiverse people. What's the connection? There's a connection there. What happens in the course of those intervening years that connects you from it? Is there something to do with what's going on with your child? What takes you there?
My son had a really unique way of learning. School was easy for me. I was always successful in school. I was successful socially. I was a mediocre athlete at whatever I tried. For Greg, it was different. And I realized that it wasn't a lack of intelligence on his part. In fact, far from it. He had this spectacular curiosity to want to know how things worked. And he took things apart, and he made terrible messes, and he lit things on fire, and he just wanted to know, and he had to touch it, and he had to tear it up, and he had to figure it out. And when you are a highly active little boy in our school system with a very young, distracted mom, you're a problem. You're a problem. That's all there is to it. And he was a problem. And, I like to say that he hated school. I think school hated him.
Mm.
And that made me so angry that they just were missing this beautiful intelligence. And at the time, the only resource that I had for learning anything about learning was the public library. And so here I am at, now all of 20, 21, 22 years old with a child in elementary school who's already failing. And you discover John Holt and unschooling, and you start thinking, wait a minute, you mean brains aren't designed to sit still in a classroom and be shouted at for the next 13 years? And John Holt was a nut, but God, he was a brilliant nut. And then you start looking at Waldorf education, which, how is a Gallup girl going to afford a private Waldorf education? Here's these people talking about taking children out into gardens and growing their own food. And I start thinking, no, this is how he learns. He learns hands-on, and he learns by experiencing things. And as I'm learning this, and as I'm watching him, he's failing, and he's failing, and he's being labeled a problem, and his behaviors are, how do you take a beautiful 8-year-old and have a depressed, angry child? And I got angry and I got protective, and I didn't get angry or protected enough because I kept being told he just needs to sit down and shut up and do it. And I just kept getting more curious. He taught me so much about learning, and so often I would just have to pull him completely out of school because it was just torturous for everyone. And so here I am working, 2 and 3 jobs at the time, still working at the racetrack. And I got to homeschool him on top of it. And then I had to rely on other people to, I had to build a village for him in how to learn. And the village that came together was not the one that I expected or even wanted. At the racetrack, they're all union jobs, and the security guards are union cops. Most of them semi-retired, a lot of them wounded San Francisco and Oakland beat cops. I don't like it, but to this day, my son loves weapons, and he learned how to respect a weapon. He learned how to care for a weapon. He learned how to handle a weapon from these cops at the racetrack. And they were so good to him. And the corporation yard, the guys who built things, they were kind to him. The guys in the video department, because I worked in the video department at night, showed him how to wire things up. It was all hands-on, and that's where he would thrive, and that's where he would shine, and that's where he would be successful. And he's a mechanic today, and a horse shower.
So you learned how to create community, teaching community. You said you had to homeschool, and you immediately, rather modestly, leapt towards what other people were teaching your son. What did you learn? How did you learn to teach? Tell us a couple of stories from that. How did he teach you how to teach a child like him?
Yeah. So I remember, here I was working at least 2 jobs. I was galloping racehorses in the morning, and I was working for the racetrack in the afternoon. So Mondays and Tuesdays were our days for school, and we had to log X amount of hours of schoolwork and turn that into the school district. And that's how I was able to. So we would collectively game the system. So we would go to downtown Berkeley, and we would go and watch a foreign film and eat popcorn. And so we would log 2 hours of reading, because we had to read the subtitles, 2 hours of foreign language, and 2 hours of history. We're 6 hours in and we've had popcorn, but it was really out in movement and, playing in the water and building dams and climbing trees and reading books that he wanted to hear about. And that was humor. He loved, I think, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy changed his life. Suddenly reading wasn't a chore and it wasn't awful. It was funny.
And where did you do this reading?
As often as we could, outside, up in trees, at the beach.
Would you climb into the trees with him and read?
Of course. I still climb trees. I love
You say,
trees.
Of course. I can tell you, Joell, your average teacher, let alone mum, does not climb into trees.
Well, they're missing something.
What made you able to follow your child like that?
It was probably desperation. Nothing else worked. If shouting at him to sit down and shut up and just do the homework worked, maybe that's where our lives would have been. But, the universe had other plans, and nothing else worked. The only time he was happy, and there's an all hands on science museum in San Francisco. Well, now there's several. This was 28 years ago. And taking him there and just letting him run loose and touch everything and experience things. And then I remember one time we went to the aquarium in San Francisco. This was the old one. And so here it is, he's homeschooling, and we're in the aquarium, and we're down below, and there's penguins, in the tank. And Greg is running back and forth, and the penguins are swimming with him and following him back and forth, and he's having the best time. And we look over, and there's a group of school kids with the teacher, who's making them go through and do everything in this very quiet, sort of organized way. And every kid was so desperately jealous of this little boy who could run with the penguins and having the time of his life. And suddenly he looked up and he went, I'm the lucky one. Nobody's telling me. And the penguins were having a great time. I was having a great time. Greg was having a great time. That's how you learn to follow the child. You have those little moments where you go, oh, this is actually learning.
So you're saying Greg, to this day, he's doing great. He's a mechanic. He's a horseshoer.
Mm-hmm.
Did he become a horseman with you?
Horses were part of his life, his whole life. His first babysitters were horses, right? Big thoroughbreds. But school continued to be torturous and awful for him. And so he was in his senior year of high school and he just wasn't going to go. He knew he wasn't going to graduate. He hated school, and they call this now school refusal, which there wasn't a term then. A dear friend of mine, who had a program in Maui, saw us really struggling and fighting and fussing, and Greg had really fallen in with a bad bunch of kids who had some pretty dangerous lifestyle habits. And so she just intervened and she said, Greg, why don't you come to Maui and work for me? And he was only 17 at the time. And we decided that we would. This was a friend that I loved and trusted, and she was willing. And so he did. And he went to Maui and he was working on a horse farm, and her stepson is on the spectrum, and they lived together. And he was famous for really violent meltdowns, and that was part of Greg's job, was to keep Ryan from hurting himself or others. And it was a hard job, and the job fell apart. So now here's my not quite 18-year-old son living out of his car in Maui. And
every mom's
thing.
Yeah.
Right. And another friend in Maui called, and she said, is Greg still looking for work? I said, he is. And she said, I really need someone to work for me at my farm. And so I called him, because every homeless person in Maui has a cell phone. And I said, look, Jillian needs someone to work for her at PU Holo Stables. And he's like, God, Mom, I'm so sick and tired of horses. I've been scooping horse manure my whole life. Blah, blah. And I said, look, I understand it's not a career move, but it's a roof over your head and it's a hot meal tonight. So just give it a go. So he agreed, and he called her and he went to work for her. And I don't think it was a week later, she was an avid polo player. And the Maui Polo Club, I think, is the oldest continually operating polo club in the United States. It's a big scene. So she goes out into the first game of the season, and somebody rides by her the opposite direction, catches her stirrup, and turns her leg completely around the other direction. A really, really violent break. And she was laying in the hospital, and she says to Greg, I need you to run everything. I need you to run all the lessons, take care of the horses, and there's no money. But what I do have is I have a string of horses, I have a rig, and I have a membership to the Maui Polo Club. So you can have my membership for the year if you'll do it all.
From homeless to member of the Maui.
From homeless to member with a full string. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a Maui story. And the local pro saw a lot of talent. Because Greg knew horses very, very, very well from the ground and wasn't afraid of hot horses because he'd been around race horses his whole life, and took him under his wing and privately tutored him. And within a year, I think Greg was rated 1 goal outdoor and 2 goals indoor, which is unheard of. And it really changed his life. And so the fact that horses would be a turning point in his life where he wanted to be healthy and he wanted to be engaged in life was a dream come true for me. he came back to the States and started working for us, adopted a horse off the track, whom you know, who would go through a forest fire for Greg. Got involved with a girl who was working for us, who is now a quite accomplished trainer in her own right. And that brings us to today.
So you're a 16-year-old girl, you get pregnant, you end up with a somewhat special needs son. You, at least in terms of what people now would probably call ADD, ADHD, and positional defiant, and so on and so on. So neurodiverse. You're galloping racehorses at the track. You find a way by following your child, reading books in trees, going into nature, moving, and finding community for him, to the point where he can find a way for horses to bring him from homeless to a 2-goal polo player. You then said he came back and started working for us and adopted a thoroughbred off the track. Somewhere in there, you went from single mum galloping racehorses on the track to having a program taking off the track thoroughbreds and using them therapeutically. Fill that gap. What happened?
I think just pretty naturally, when you gallop horses at the track, you start to wonder what happens to them afterwards. And then you start placing them, which is a great excuse to do a little competing. But then you have these horses that, they're not a 16 one-hand gray gelding, with a nice balanced body that is going to very easily find a show home. What do you do with a one-eyed horse with a big ankle, who's a fantastic horse, who gave you everything on the track? How do you help that horse? Because that's going to be a hard horse to place. And then I just started thinking about the karmic debt that we owe horses as a rule, everything that a horse has done for humanity, but in particular race horses, because they so willingly give you everything. And they do get hurt and they do break down. I started collecting is the wrong word, but there were a few horses that I knew were going to be really, really, really tricky to place. And so what can those horses do? And then you realize that you've got to have a lot of skill with keeping them comfortable in their bodies, and a lot of skill with training them so that they're quiet enough in their bodies to maybe be a lower level schoolmaster, or be a good trail horse. So it really started with the square peg horses, right? The horses that we're going to have a hard time fitting in. But I had an experience. I started to garner, and I think probably just from my experience with realizing that people learn a whole lot differently than we were taught to teach. So I'd gotten a reputation in running a riding school for working with kids that were going to be a little more difficult to teach. And, a friend of mine told me one time, it takes no talent to teach talent. And I thought, well, that's an interesting challenge. Yeah. And it's certainly true, right? If we think about it. And, we so often want to compete for those clients who are talented, and those clients don't stick around, right? Because they get recruited by every other trainer. And I thought, I don't want to do this. I really want to invest in students that I want to spend time with, and with horses that I want to spend time with. I didn't want to be in a business where I was just turning horses over constantly and turning clients over. I wanted people that, if they wanted to launch into a different discipline that I didn't specialize in, that would be great, but it would be a natural movement rather than this kind of ugly dog eat dog sort of world that I saw in the horse business. And, so I got a reputation as an instructor who had, and I'm putting air quotes around, a lot of patience, because I don't know how anybody can be successful in the horse world unless you have some degree of patience. And so this family brought this little girl out for riding lessons, and she was just a cute little red-haired, freckle-faced little girl, and she was very shy. And the parents came to me and said, "Well, she has autism." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And they said, "It means nothing. Just treat her like any other child." I said, "Well, okay." And she was shy, and we could work around that. And she certainly seemed like she liked the horses, even if she was afraid of them. And so I had thrown her into a few group lessons, and we were out one day, a day I'll never forget. And we're in the ring, and it's just one of those windy, shitty days. And the horses are distracted. My voice isn't carrying, so I'm shouting really loud to be heard. And the barn crew decides that they've had it with this crappy weather, and they're going to feed the horses early and go home. So now I'm teaching a group lesson, and all the horses in the arena can hear is the horses in the barn being fed. So now they're super distracted. So every time this little girl goes by the gate, of course, the horse just hangs a hard right-hand turn to the gate. So I do what every riding instructor since the dawn of time says to do, and I shout at her to hold her left rein. And the horse ducks to the gate. So we go around again, and of course the horse ducks to the gate. So I did what I was supposed to do, I thought, and that is shout more loudly to hold the left rein. So this goes on, and it's just getting awful. And I'm doing my best. I'm shouting so loud that obviously anybody could understand. All you have to do is hold the damn left rein. So I go marching
That's how
over.
they teach languages in schools too, right? Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Shout louder. Yeah.
Shout louder. And which I was doing, with alacrity. I was really holding my line. And so I ran over and I grabbed the horse's rein, and I made a face at this beautiful little girl. And I looked up at her and I said, "All you have to do is hold the left rein." And she leans over and she gets almost nose to nose with me. And she just whispers, "I'm trying."
Hi.
And
Whew.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I felt the ground underneath me just move and shake.
Yeah.
Everything changed in that moment.
Yeah.
Everything changed. And I think that was the moment my life changed. And I realized this is the service I need to do. I need to recognize when someone's trying. I need to honor the student way more than I was. And I needed to change the way I thought about everything. Yeah.
Now, Joell, hats off, because not every riding instructor would have listened.
Mm.
What made you listen?
I don't know, but it was so profound. It was such a physical experience. And I realized that I'm not teaching I don't believe, and I've thought about this a lot since then, I don't believe that anyone has ever taught anyone anything. I think we learn when we decide to learn. And if you wear the mantle of teacher, you have to honor that every day. That all you can do is present information the best you can. And the learning is up to the learner, not the teacher. And I think it's the same with horses too. I mean, how many ways to the piaffe are there? There's so many ways, and every horse is going to show you their way. And you can't teach the piaffe. You have to search and look for it and see what happens. And then you can help develop it, but you're not teaching.
What happened to that little girl?
That family, I was associated with some families that were close to that family. I think at that time, and you can speak to this certainly better than I can. At that time, there was very much a very big school of what I call the Get Over It School of Autism Therapy.
I do remember that school, and it's still out there.
Yeah.
Sadly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that family was quite dedicated to that school. Yeah.
Did you manage, after that moment where she communicated to you that she needed compassion and joy, before she was taken away to a world of less joy, would you say that you managed to switch your approach with her?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
how? How did you do it? What did you do? What did you change?
Well, the first thing I did is I told the parents that I only wanted to work one-on-one. And then we went to the round pen, where we could, Skinner would call it sterilizing the environment, right? Where you had less distractions and you had less things that she needed to do. She didn't need to necessarily steer. She could just start, feeling the horse going forward, and we could add one element at a time. And then I just decided that it had to be more fun. Just had to be more fun. Nobody ever changed the world because they knew what diagonal to post on. Like it's never actually made the world any better. But that was early on, but it was definitely
before we go,
smart.
because it's a really interesting point, because the listeners don't know where you've gotten to now. We will get there, because it's worth hanging with this, anyone who's listening, because Joell's program is for sure, I'd say it's probably it's in the top 10 in the world, in terms of its effectiveness with neurodiverse people. And we'll go into why that is. So how did you make it more fun? How did you make it more joyful? What did you do? What did you change?
I changed me, right? I changed the focus or the intention. That who cares about this academic world of riding a horse? Let's just enjoy it. What do you like about the horse? Which horse do you like? What is he, is he funny? Is he sweet? Or when you're scared, what does he do that's scary? So it was an invitation to having conversations about not just what the horse was, but who the horse was. So personalizing the horse, I think, was something that came pretty naturally to me. But, when you find yourself running a riding school, the numbers add up, and if you can get 6 kids and horses in a lesson, you can make a living. But making it way more personal, and then fun. Do you think the horse is having fun? Well, what could the horse do that's having fun? And that started to change everything, and it just gave me so much freedom to do something way more interesting than some type of an academic riding school, which then I later learned came out of a military tradition. That's how I came up. I was shouted at and screamed at and told how awful I was. Yeah, I did my time there, and just, and I'm grateful actually to those teachers, because it helped me understand what I didn't want in a riding school. And in those moments where I'm shouting to hold the left rein, thinking, well, this is no good. This isn't what I want.
So before we move on from where this girl changed you to where you are now, which is an impressive climb, does a memory stand out from this girl before she left your life, where it did become fun, where it became healing?
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was, because I'd been quite a bit more successful with this girl, autism families just started coming in, and some of whom are still in my life, and that was 20 some odd years ago. And so it became one of the few places that she could go where she felt successful. And that that was healing for her. It was healing for me. Any teacher who hears that and who doesn't get really turned on by that and say, wow, somebody really wants to be here. This is the place they'd rather be than anywhere else.
So, and this girl learned how to operate your off the track thoroughbreds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's not too shabby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, this is you running a small survival riding school. Suddenly you're getting overwhelmed with people, with children with autism, because you did well with this autistic girl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know that you have several methods that you use. I know that you use horseboy method. I know that you use movement method. I know that you train horses in hand with the Valenzas, old classical Baroque. What are your go-to methods? And what are not your go-to methods? Basically, what is square peg?
Yeah. Method is such a tricky word, right? Because it seems restrictive. I like to think of it, and I think you and I have had long conversations about this, that the thing that really excited me about Horseboy was that it was a framework. I felt like it gave me a set of principles that I could hang flesh and muscles and clothes and jewelry off of. And that's what I liked, because, I'm just not good at methods. Because every horse, if you don't like unpredictability, probably shouldn't be in the horse business, but for people with short attention spans like us, it works really well, right? We're dilettantes. We want to be adaptive. We want to roll with what's happening today. And when you've got rigidity, right, that's going to break. And so having the flexibility of a framework, which one of those big portions of the framework, like the encompassing bit, is joy. Certainly self-advocacy is our North Star, but what propels that is joy and fun. And if it's not fun, there's a million other things and therapies and activities that most of our families are participating in that aren't based in fun.
Yeah.
And we know the brain science now that it pays off. It pays off. And like I said, if sitting around and shouting at people worked better, maybe I'd do it. But all things being equal, let's have fun. And so there's a lot of silliness around here. There's a lot of creativity and self-expression. There's a lot of costuming and dressing up around here. There's a lot of music, and it's so great to, the technology that we have now with Bluetooth speakers that we can put on a saddle and clip to it. And if you can't do that, we've got a horse that plays the ukulele. I don't know. Have you seen those videos? Yeah.
I have not seen those videos.
Oh,
I think I would like to see those videos. Yeah,
you should see those
I think
videos.
our listeners would probably like to see those videos. Your horse is playing.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah.
All in favor say aye. Yeah, that's a resounding aye. Okay.
He's got chops. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got chops. And so, and then we start giggling around with whether or not we should, we've got horses that love to pick things up and shake them. So we've got to start a band.
But you say that you don't like methods, but you also said the neuroscience to it now.
Yeah.
And I also see you diligently following the old master system of training horses with the lunge, with the in-hand work, and then the assisted in-hand work in the manner of the old masters, which clearly is getting great results with these horses, both from the horse's point of view and from the kid's point of view. So there seems to be, to me, an interesting mix there of freedom and free expression, mixed with hard science, mixed with humbling yourself to an ancient tradition that works. And somehow in the midst of all those three apparently contradictory things, the square peg delivers up what?
Sweetness. I know, but it's what it comes down to. It's sweetness. The horse feels good. The people are feeling good. The parents, as a parent, there's nothing sweeter than the sound of your child laughing and enjoying themselves.
And what is the child learning? What are they learning while they're in this sweet state? Give me some examples.
Well, we want to focus on what they want to learn. And a lot of it is self-expression. A lot of it is self-expression. And I think, what we hear, if you give the child the opportunity to share their interests, they're reinforcing things that they're struggling to learn. We had, during COVID, and we've got a little video of it somewhere. We had one girl dress herself up as a bottle of hand sanitizer. and then she painted the coronavirus molecule on a horse, and then she bathed him, right? And so that was her way of washing away the coronavirus and being part of the cure, and no longer, part of being scared. It's pretty out of the box, pretty weird, right up there with a horse playing ukulele.
Okay, so let's say I bring my child to you, and I say, okay, it's clear that you can get communication going. I have a child that doesn't want to communicate. Now I want to take it further. I'd like my child to get comfortable with maths. They don't seem to enjoy maths. What's your approach to that? What are you doing?
Well, I mean, first we have to figure out what the math level of the learner is. And also remember, music is math, right?
Right.
We've got 8 counts, and you can factor that into, 4 sets of 2 sets of 4, 8 ones, 1 8, and infinite and unending numbers of zeros, and playing with the rhythm of the horse and music. That's one easy one. That's one of my favorite ones. And also reminding parents that listening to music is math, enjoying music is math, dance is math. I think, do you remember, we were in Thailand, and there was a boy playing guitar, and his mother was so upset, and he was self-taught from YouTube videos, and his mother was incensed that he wasn't learning math, and helping him understand, oh my gosh, this is all math, was helpful for her. So at some point, yes, there is the performative academics that you do to make a family feel happier. But the stealthy academics are way more challenging and way more fun. And I would say when it comes to math and math concepts, either music or the actual physics, jumping off into the stream and building dams and rediverting water and thinking about how much pressure it's going to take to make the water flow down the hill.
So you will get the child off the horse doing things like this,
sure,
showing them the physics, then remounting them, having them working the rhythm of the horse, counting them and putting the numbers together. Then they're with math, both on the horse, both off the horse, in that natural environment. Would that be a typical?
Yeah. Very typical.
Yeah,
very typical.
I think I would maybe want to send my child to that.
A lot of reading books on horses too,
Okay.
and talking about books that we're reading, normalizing the fact that people read and enjoy books can be very educational. When a book is otherwise just this torturous thing that people make you do, instead, all of a sudden you're around a bunch of people and they're all excited to talk about books. Well, guess what? That child wants to read a book, so he can bring it back next week and participate in that conversation.
You talked about getting the kid off the horse. Would you say that is as important when you're doing equine assisted stuff
100%.
as the work with the horse?
Yeah. Anytime you get attached to how much time or what percentage of the time the person spends on the horse, you've already lost. Not that it's a zero sum game, but because then you're forcing someone on a horse, And, even the square peg name is about not forcing a fit, right? Because if you force a square peg into a round hole, you're forcing that fit, and and then you're not only creating resistance, but you're destroying the peg and possibly the hole.
So I'm a
Just a
child.
mess.
I get
Mhm.
brought to your place.
Mhm.
Parents say, I want to try this equine therapy thing.
Mhm.
It's clear that I want nothing to do with the horse.
Mm.
What are you going to do?
Mhm. We are going to make sure that we have a volunteer who is close enough with the horse, but then the instructor, the employee, is going to figure out what you like, what you're interested in. And we're going to be really, really, really sensitive to how close we can bring and involve the horse in that activity. And that may take weeks. Um, and then somebody else is going to be talking to the parent and explaining to them what's going on so that they feel involved in it and they don't feel like they're wasting their time, or helping that parent just go for a walk and spend some time alone, or go with a friend to the coffee shop.
So you will find out the child's interests, follow those interests, whether they're horse or not. Have the horse sort of available
Mm-hmm.
to let the child grow into.
Yeah.
If
And
they want
naturally
to.
find either funny or very natural ways to involve the horse in the conversation. And a lot of times, and I think the rescue aspect of the horses plays into that, because you'll find a softness and a care that most people will have for an animal. And this horse needs help. And, he's a recovering ukulele addict. And, so it can be silly, it can be ridiculous. But laughter's a beautiful way to impel learning.
When the client, let's say, because they could be a child, they could be a young adult,
Mhm.
reaches a certain level of engagement with the horse, you've built this relationship. Do you involve them as trainers?
Absolutely.
Tell me how you
And
do that.
well, it's empowering, right? I'm not just using this horse as a beast of burden. I'm helping this horse feel better in his body. I'm helping this horse learn new things. We do a lot of trick training around here, and liberty too, which can be really, really, really empowering for somebody who's constantly being told what to do, to be put in the position to get 1,100 pounds of ex-racehorse to do something silly like step up on a pedestal or bow or smile or lay down. We've got one who loves to lay down now. And so we can get people to sit on him and then get back up. And it's a really thrilling, big feeling. So, also taking what the horse's natural interest is too. Again, this was a horse that when he was frustrated would throw himself on the ground. That's a problem in training him for what we're doing, but we turned it into something sweet. And now he'll lay down on cue, and you can get on him and he'll stand back up. So again, this just suits my own ADD dilettante type brain, to try and just roll with whatever's being presented.
Do you find that a lot of your clients actually make quite good horse trainers?
I do.
Why do you think that is?
One of the part of autism is a brutal honesty, right? And horses love honesty, and they love consistency. They're so much happier with that than with other people who have, fuzzy, weird rules that change all the time. Somebody who's very clear, and no, you don't get the treat or whatever until you do X, and holds boundaries, is refreshing to a horse. And also just the joy. It feels good when the horse does these groovy, fun things, and we can play around and say, look, this is a bullfighting move, and this is how a bullfighting horse feels. And now you feel him dancing. And then you'll find that the people that we serve start asking for it. Well, he feels a little sticky today. Can we do the bullfighting stuff? Nobody wants to kick a horse around in circles. And we all have horses that some days just don't want to do it. So when he gets in that flowy feel, it feels good. Feels good. Yeah, there's no joy in just brutalizing horse in the rib cage.
Given that the horse world can be a pretty rough world, obviously the racetrack, obviously the sport world, but also, the riding teacher world, as you say, it comes from the military, so it's shouting at people and so on, unless they go through an evolution like yours. Within the therapy world and the equine assisted world, what changes would you like to see? What would you like to see more of?
Have you seen the study that just came out this week out of Cornell about, they've put EEG, little helmets on horses?
No, I have not. Tell me about it.
Oh, I made some notes here. I'll just read you these 2 sentences because they're significant in answering the question. So it says horses in stables showed an average of 2.5 times more right hemisphere gamma waves than those living in open fields with other horses. In people, such waves are often a sign of anxiety, distraction, and depression. The horses that spent most of their time out in the open fields showed twice as many left hemisphere theta waves on average, which is generally a sign of calm and attentive mind. I think paying attention to the environment and the social needs that our horses have before delving into making sure that the horse's social and exercise needs are attended to before expecting them to participate in a healing modality is what I'd like to see more of in the equine therapy world.
I guess that's logical if the horse is supposed to transfer well-being.
Yeah.
If the horse is not in well-being, how are they going to do that?
Well, and you introduced me to Nina Ekholm-Frey, who's been doing so much of the studies on the permission-based horsemanship in the equine guided field. And at the time when she started that, I think she took a lot of heat. And it's nice to see people recognizing that if you're not attending to the horse's social and physical needs, it's just plain dangerous to ask him to interact with people who need healing.
I agree. We were talking about brain science earlier too. For those listeners who don't know, when a horse goes in soft collection and it rocks the rider's hips, it fills the rider with a feel-good hormone called oxytocin, which also happens to be the communication hormone. So if you have someone who's in a high level of anxiety, you're filling them with a feel-good hormone and a hormone that makes them want to communicate. And then when they move and problem solve, which is the balancing, a protein is produced in the brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which over time, working with neuroscientists, we've obviously found out, can be transferred for neuroplasticity in people. Do you find that this same process works for the horse? Do you feel that the horse is getting oxytocin as well when you're working him in this way? Do you feel the horse is getting BDNF as well? And if so, how is that making life better both for that horse and for whatever client is interacting with that horse?
The studies aren't that far along with the horses, but it would certainly seem that the horses are regulated. What do we look for in a horse if we're judging in a hunter course, right? We're looking for this horse that's soft over his back, that where his neck and his shoulders meet, he doesn't have a lot of tension, that his legs swing evenly, that he has a soft gaze, that his ears are even and pointed forward. All of those things indicate, a horse that is regulated, and whether or not that translates as oxytocin, we don't know yet, but we certainly see on the outside of the horse, a horse that is regulated and feeling good. We can translate that into our own bodies, and we certainly feel it. Any rider knows the difference between a horse that is stressed and uneven as opposed to a horse that's even just going down the trail, right? That head bobbing, swinging, let's go somewhere curiosity, as opposed to the Jesus Christ, we got to go back to the barn. This is awful. Yeah, you don't have to be a horseman to feel that. You just have to have a heartbeat.
What about neuroplasticity, brain change, positive brain change? What
positive brain change?
Yeah. Would you say you see this in the horse? And
absolutely. And again, what I've seen with the in-hand work when it's done skillfully, is that the uptake of information is so quick. We're having horses learn faster now that we're 5 or 6 years into using the Valenza method than I've ever imagined. The group we have between the two farms, we have 26 horses right now. Never, ever had as good a group of horses as we have right now. And these are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old thoroughbreds, and, really grouchy 21-year-old thoroughbreds too, with a lot of injuries. And they're coming up and learning faster and faster and faster. It blows me away. So, so the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day. And so you can draw a pretty straight line in between doing good in-hand and lunging work and a horse's learning curve and neuroplasticity and being able to tolerate more stressful situations before just having a refusal or whatever that is. It's what I see. And I'm pretty confident that the science will play out. And so it's really nice that they're, again, that's why I loved this study from Cornell, is that they're finally, they're measuring brain waves on horses that are regulated. And we all know that an anxious, distracted, and depressed mind doesn't pick up or retain information that well. And there used to be an old cowboy saying that says, you can whoop a horse into understanding, but you're going to have to do it again tomorrow. Right. And, that's a very rough way of saying it. But I came from that rough school of horsemanship, and we did, and you had to do it over and over and over and over again.
Until there was an accident.
Until there was an accident. Yeah. Or until the horse just gave up.
Yeah.
And we thought that was training. Well,
we were told to do it. Yeah, we were
told to do it.
That hard school. Yeah.
We were told to do it. Yeah.
But I think we all observed that it didn't really work.
Didn't really work.
If it did, we wouldn't be looking for other things. But you mentioned Valenza method. I will put for those of you who are listening who listen to that, I'll put a web link at the end of this for the Valenza family and this classical work that they do in hand. I'll make sure that that's there in the links at the end of this. So we've gone from your backyard off the track thoroughbred thing to now here you are receiving regular grants from the Off the Track Thoroughbred Association. You are receiving awards from them. You are a registered health provider now with San Mateo County. Is that correct? Talk to me about that for mental health. How has that played out?
So San Mateo County Mental Health has engaged us with a contract to provide equine assisted mental health services for the county. So what we did was we did a series of retreats for the mental health providers where we actually brought them out for a full day long sensory based day of helping them build resilient skills. And at the end of the day, we did what in horseboy work we called sensory work, which was putting them on the horses body to body in different positions that of course the children have shown us, and getting them a feeling of being supported and up on the horses in these very vulnerable positions. And for a lot of people, a significant amount, it's a really emotional experience. And people who have been around horses our whole lives and grew up around horses, it doesn't feel that special to us because that's how we spent time on our ponies, laying backwards on our pony out in the field. And if we rolled off, you rolled into the grass and you giggled and you laughed and you dropped your book, or we would sit 2 or 3 on a horse and, somebody's up on his neck and somebody's, but for people who aren't around horses, this is life changing. And so to give them that experience, and then we set it up with the therapist where they have the opportunity to either come with their client or whether they send the client here and we're supporting the therapeutic goals for that person. And we ended up doing a lot of intense services for a youth program that's kind of a quasi, it's kind of the space between foster placement and juvenile detention facility. These are kids that kind of are in that space in between. And it's a residential program. And we're seeing those kids come out 2 and 3 times a week. And they're now volunteering with us too. And they have been really, really, really good in working with our autism families. So it's been a really nice integration. We're also working on piloting a program for the San Mateo County Department of Education to do resilience workshops, including the somatic stuff for teachers experiencing burnout. So pretty exciting stuff.
So this is mental health beyond autism, and this mental health of mental health care providers in a weird way, like in-hand work for the horse, in brain work for the carers. How do you deal with burnout, Joell? I mean, you were a stressed out single mum. You were a teenage stressed out single mum, galloping racehorses on the track, risking your life. You had to start a whole organization from scratch. You have built it now to one of the biggest, equine facilities certainly in California, and you're right there in Silicon Valley. You've got 2 locations now. I know that there's another rather cool location coming up, which I hope you'll tell us. I've seen you. I know the intensity of this work and everything that goes into it, the horse training, not to mention the fundraising, not to mention the money. How do you yourself deal with burnout? What's your advice for the people in this field, rate burnout?
I think doing something creative outside of whether it's, horses still turn me on. I'm so lucky that way. But, I have times where I need a break. But writing, even journaling, is a creative endeavor that helps. Cooking. I love cooking. It's a creative challenge. And I've gotten quite into cold water sea swimming here, which I really, 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 really enjoy. But I'm so lucky to do what I love doing. And I have a pretty strong meditation practice too.
Talk to me about the creative writing.
Well, I finally finished a novel. I've got a screenplay sketched out that just needs all of the bells and whistles hung on it, and that's a creative form that I never expected that I was gonna, and it just came. So it's kind of fun, and if it turns into nothing, who cares? I'm enjoying the process, and I'm working on a book that is the Square Peg story that Trafalgar Square has given me a handshake deal for, that said that they would love first option on that, and I'm about 60,000 words in, so I've got a pretty good go at a first draft. Yeah.
I don't know where you find the time. Tell us about the novel. What's it about? Can we buy it? Can we read it?
Sure. You can buy it as a Kindle at adamfinehand.com.
Is that the name of the book?
That is the name of the book.
A Damn Fine Hand. What's it about? That's great.
It is a fun title.
What's the story? What's it about?
The story is, it's a fictional telling of it's the girl and horse story, right? Which has been told over and over again, but it started as a short story where I was really fascinated by thinking about Black Beauty as a story. Black Beauty was the first time anybody told a story from the animal's point of view. And Black Beauty launched the movement that created the SPCA. So a story really can change the world. And that story did. And I thought, just as a creative exercise, I wanted to see what would happen if I got in the mind of a horse and took him through the journey of going from the racetrack to the slaughter pipeline. And what a lot of people don't understand is I very much appreciate the efforts of the Humane Society, but what Humane Society did about 10 years ago was that they outlawed slaughter in the United States, which sounds like a real win. What it did was that it forced the slaughter to go across the border to Mexico and Canada. And the transport of animals across those borders is unregulated, and the slaughterhouses are unregulated. And it unfortunately created a pipeline of suffering that is spectacular. So, if you're signing a petition, read the whole petition. Not that I'm advocating that we need slaughterhouses or that we need to slaughter horses. But, if we're euthanizing horses, which any horseman has to do, we have to think about the compassionate way to do it rather than kicking the can down the road. And I wanted to tell that story. And I thought that telling that story from the horse's point of view was the only really effective way to do it. So A Damn Fine Hand started as a short story of that horse going through that experience. And I named the horse Vaya con Dios, which is go with God. And I realized that this horse was the best Buddhist that I'd ever met, let alone created in my life, that he truly lived in the moment, in the here and now, and he lived with true forgiveness. And the story grew from there, grew from characters in that story to the people in his life who surrounded him and what their stories were.
And we can, how do we order this book? How can we get this book?
You can go to adamfinehand.com and purchase a Kindle version of the book if you'd like to download it, or you can contact, oh my gosh, I've forgotten the name of the bookstore here in town because that's where my mind is right now. Give me a minute and I'll think of it, or I'll send it to you and we can
send it to us. We'll put it in the links, but adamfinehand.com, I think we'll put that there too.
Yeah.
One of the things with burnout that I find interesting is that we're surprised by it. And we're outraged by it. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I burned out. It's like, well, of course one burned out, and of course one burns out regularly and often. And, and fires need to be relit. I say this as if it was obvious, but of course, I myself had to spend 30 years before I tumbled to this. That of course burnout's inevitable. And in fact, is often, I think, proof that you're doing very good work. Now, mums burn out because they're great mums. People burn out in their jobs because they're working very hard and doing a good job at it. But obviously in this line of work with equine, anything equine, but particularly equine with vulnerable human populations, not to mention vulnerable equine populations, which of course you do, you also have this responsibility to keep everybody safe. And so into the bargain, on top of how exhausting and demanding and absorbing and amazing and interesting and all this the work is, there's also this underlying stress constantly of I must keep everybody safe in an environment that has many, many inherent risks, and take responsibility for those risks. So what often surprises me is that we have no training is offered us, or no mentorship is offered us, whether it's from our parents or in school or in college later, or that prepares us for the inevitability of burnout and almost allows us to make friends with burnout and to say, from time to time, you will burn out, and that's okay, because really that's just says, now you need a pause between the last awesome thing and the next awesome thing that you're going to take on. even Hercules rests between the 12 tasks. And so given that, what's your advice particularly for younger people coming into this field? Because a lot of people come into it, obviously, with a lot of altruism, as one should. Altruism is a good thing. And then they, of course, get surprised. What's your advice to someone going into the field for how to thrive?
Help me pronounce his name because your French is way more sophisticated. Albert Camus?
Camus. You hit it right.
Camus. Okay.
Like a camel with an
ooh. A camel with an ooh.
Yeah.
A double
ooh.
Wrote an essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. That I'm a nerd and I love essays. And it's the most beautiful story. And right, Sisyphus, that was his sentence, right, is to roll this boulder up to the top of the hill, and it rolls back down every time. And he's destined to have to do this over and over and over and over again. And what Camus does is he said, what if we imagine Sisyphus is happy in his job, that it's the natural, normal thing? Of course the boulder rolled down the hill. It's supposed to roll down the hill. And now he knows exactly what he needs to do. And so he stands at the top of the hill and he watches that boulder down and he laughs. And he says, I got to go back down the hill and get the boulder. That to me is the most beautiful anti-burnout story there is. And I review it.
Interesting.
I review it pretty regularly.
Thank you for the tip. Right. So the rolling up of the boulder is its own art form. Rolling up, he knows what his work is, right? He knows exactly what he has to do. And how beautiful is that, to know exactly what you have to do? And perhaps with every time he rolls it up, he notices more nuances of the stone or more nuances of the vegetation or strength in his body, or
he chooses to be happy at his task. He chooses to find something interesting. He chooses to find some difference, something to learn, something about it. He chooses to be happy that he knows exactly what he needs to do. He has a choice and he chooses happiness.
A lovely, lovely metaphor. I'm so going to steal it.
Enjoy it.
Thank you. Because obviously in all of our line of work, we're dealing with burnout, whether it's ourselves or the people we're working with or workshops we're giving or, blah, even with horses. But yes, it's true. We do not stop to consider, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We do not stop to consider that the beauty of starting again from scratch every time. Like I know this as a writer, when I write a new book, it really doesn't matter how many books I've written. It doesn't matter if they were successful. That you are starting from the beginning every time. And there's this feeling of, I thought I knew how to write. And now it's like, it feels like rolling a boulder uphill. Interestingly, I do not have that reaction when I'm starting new horses. I always have that thing of, here I go again. Interesting, But what I've had to learn to do with writing is to say to myself, when it feels Sisyphean,
Sisyphean.
Camels with an U. When it feels that way, it's just to put I call it putting one word in front of the other and saying, this may be rubbish now, but it will not become good until it exists. So let it exist as rubbish, and then I can make it good later. We don't give ourselves that permission, do we? We got to be perfect every time. But that's where the dressage comes in dressage. Well, you didn't execute that thing perfect. Well, of course I didn't, because I'm going through a learning curve. How could I possibly? And by the way, I never will. Actually, I'd like to move in that direction, but none of us will ever achieve perfection. And of course, the joy is killed. And you've talked about joy a lot, and I love that you've brought into the Sisyphean boulder rolling uphill thing that could actually be really joyful, and to consider that rather than saying this burnout thing is a dragon I must slay. like this autism thing is a dragon I'm a slayer. We know, well, that will never work.
Yeah.
The autism is a perfectly viable way to go through life. Otherwise, Temple Grandin would not have all the degrees she had and has, and not have published all the books she has. And clearly she's very successful and autistic. So the burnout is the autism problem. Is the burnout the problem? No, suffering is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. The suffering brain, cortisol, stress hormone, learning brain is the happy brain. The unhappy brain is not the learning brain. But I love how you've just brought that to our attention. So how would you help an ambitious and impatient young person going into this field, and perfectionistic, because horse people are, to come to that sort of outlook and perspective? Give us a tip.
I think journaling is really critical, because it gives you an opportunity to make that choice, right? Of course, the boulder rolled down the hill again. It's supposed to, and it's going to the next time and the next time. And so you can stand at the top of the mountain and curse and yell and kick. But if you journal it out, then you get the opportunity to reframe the situation and make a choice as to how you want to proceed and how you want to be perceived. Why are you in this field? And any of us in mental health, any of us in healing need to think about why we're in the field, and we need to think about it regularly so that we don't fall into the trap of pity and being condescending, because once we're there, we're not helping anyone.
No. And then of course we very quickly slide into self-pity and self-condescending,
Yeah, it's natural.
which is beating ourselves up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree with you. I think it's natural. I don't think one can escape it, because I think that's part of the human condition, but perhaps one can learn to use it as a thriving mechanism. Is this the acquisition of wisdom? Is this the acquisition of resources and skills? Does Sisyphus get a little buffer, richer, happier, healthier, fitter every time he rolls the boulder up? Is the rolling of the boulder up the thriving? And is the relaxed walk down? Could you be admiring the view? Could you be? Is that your retreat time? When you just walking relaxed down the hill, swinging your shoulders, whistling, smelling the herbs on the mountain, looking at the sea. Because I've just placed myself in California and ancient Greece for some reason. And then, oh look, here's the bouldering.
There it is.
Oh, good a thunk.
There you are again.
Yeah. Humor helps, no?
Humor helps.
Tell me a funny story from Square Peg.
We have a little boy. He's adopted. His life before adoption pretty traumatic, and he's beautiful. He's just so damn cute and very innocent looking. And when he's frustrated, he says some very bad words.
Naughty words.
And he says them in context, and he sends them, which is really impressive. And his mom is wonderful, and she knows with him, and he runs hard and he chases things. And this is a kid who can pluck a butterfly out of the sky. What did he catch? We caught a quail with his hands.
What?
Yeah. He
That's
it's very cool. Like
I don't.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that.
If
you're a bobcat or something.
Yeah.
Able to leap 15 feet into the air. I know how fast those things move. A quail.
He caught a rubber boa. We haven't seen a rubber boa here. He has caught
a snake.
Skinks. Yeah.
Okay.
He's caught little skinks. I brought him to a place one time that had a little rabbit hutch in it, and turned my head to do something, turned back. He was in the rabbit hutch, which is impressive. So, he's super, super, super physical. And so being on the horse, on the lunge at the canter is really regulating for him. Lots of sleep problems. But he wanted to run around and, and catch snakes. And his mother's like, look,
his naughty word.
Gone. Yeah. And well,
is that the key? He shouts these very naughty words and the snakes freeze in shock. And
no, but his mom said
you.
He can't keep coming back unless he spends at least 25 minutes on the horse. So we're trying to figure out how to do this without forcing him on the horse.
Why did she say that out of interest? Why does it matter?
It matters to her. And we've talked about it, but it matters to her.
Okay.
And I think mostly because when he is on the horse, it's demonstrable how much better he sleeps.
Okay.
Right. And their life is much better when he sleeps, obviously. So we told him that the horse's back is a safe place where he can say anything he wants.
Did he take that opportunity?
He did. And the problem is, it's really hard to keep lunging a pony when this adorable 7-year-old is going, come on, beep, 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 mother beeping. So we're trying not to fall on the ground. And we, of course, know that we're reinforcing the behavior by laughing. So now his mom comes back and she's like, look, we're,
look,
the
mother.
Pretty much. And of course, we think that we, really pulled off something great. So, but, she knows that he's going to get in a lot of trouble for, saying bad words for the mother thing. And so we had to come up with secret swear words that were so awful and so terrible that, they can only be spoken from the pony's back. And so as a staff, we would come up with these nonsense words and we would say them and we were just like, oh, everybody was like, so now you've got this adorable 7-year-old standing around going, Barfig Nugan!
Barfig Nugan. Ooh. Yeah, I felt a chill.
German is fantastic that way, right? Yeah. And then you would have to just and then you would make it so that other people would be walking by and just kind of flinch, as he would say it, because the payoff would be so big. So we would, we'd spend the whole week coming up with these terrible, terrible made up words. But Farfignugan is one of the best ones. And so even today, months ago, we did this. Farfignugan. Yeah.
That's that definitely freezes the spleen. Yeah, absolutely.
It does. Yeah. You have to kind of wipe up after saying that. Yeah.
A confession. Yeah.
Exactly. Bless me, Father, for I Farfignugan. And it's just a funny story. And coming up with new words or just walking by him and leaning over and whispering in his ear, dude, Farfignugan. They're running away and laughing.
It's really interesting that, because I remember with my son, Rowan, when he went through a phase now 10, 12 years ago of wanting to say beep, 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 beep all the time. And we gave him a safe place to do it. And people said, he's going to just abuse that all the time. And yeah, there were a couple of times he said it in the wrong place. But actually what happened is he totally got it out of his system. And we didn't make it a holy grail. And we made it funny. And we realized it was going to happen anyway. So we rather roll with it. But then I also taught him the history of those words, because those are very old words in the English language. In fact, they show up in Beowulf from the 5th century, the first poem in English, and it's in there. The one we all know, the fun one. And then from there we could go into Anglo-Saxon history and the fall of the empire and, blah, blah, blah. We could go further there up into Norse history and the Norse gods. And it was a really good way into all sorts of things. And then to reading the poem itself. So what I love is that what you did is, as well as giving the safe space and the regulating behavior, and he's now on the horse and having fun and sleeping, but also you've shown him social context.
Mm-hmm.
You've shown him in a really stealthy, under the table sort of a way, so that it's not going to be resisted. This is how you can be fun and a bit naughty in a social context that will be then rewarded and you won't be punished. And it's also inventive. But what I really love is you hit on a very key thing, which I feel is often missing in the world of equine assisted stuff, because it's a very bit of a serious world. And to the detriment of, I think if you're working, particularly if you're working with kids, it's like, if you're not laughing at least every couple of minutes, you're kind of in the wrong business. Any time one is using toilet humor or a 4-letter word or whatever, it's an act of rebellion. Mm-hmm. And if a child is being told from day one, you're not right, you need therapy, that's why you are going to this square peg place, or that's why you're going to this therapeutic riding place or whatever, and they're also in all these other therapies and blah 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 blah, and you're not right, and you must do this and you must do that, and and their spirits get broken. You see this, what we call being therapied out. It's another form of burnout. And I know so few people who are able to restore the broken spirits of people, because it's not just kids, who have been given a profound sense of shame about who they are. Mm-hmm. And the only way, that's a form of oppression, and the only way you can shake off the oppressor is to rebel, to break the chains. And often that's violently done. I mean, that's obviously what teenage rebellion is and so on. And to give an outlet for that, where you can rebel in a constructive way that will not get you in trouble, will actually win you brownie points, but will restore your self-respect. That's genius. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I don't know many people, Joell, who can do that, where you see the bigger picture, you follow where the child is at, you see what the dangers are, and you sidestep them by coming up with something inventive that negates the negative side, but gives all the positive outcomes. It's genius. Are you training people at Square Peg? Are you
We are. Yeah.
How did somebody get trained or mentored by you?
The pandemic slowed down a lot of the mentoring that I was doing for new programs, which I realized I really, really enjoyed. I love travel. I love working with people with their horses and their facility and giving them license to learn the Farfignugan game. But, the pandemic slowed all of that down. But what it did was that I invested much more into our staff here and our horses here. And we have some really brilliant humans working here, and they're doing better work than I've ever done because of the work that has been done in the past, because of spending 7, 8, 9 years with Horseboy Method and traveling around and seeing other world-class programs like this Kennett. So I think that mentoring has been some of the most satisfying work I've ever done, because I get to sit here and watch it bear fruit. Mm-hmm. And then we grew a job training program for young adults with autism and got that funded through a regional center here. And most people in this field, especially if you're a nonprofit, you will get a certain group of people who...
I lost you again.
Better?
Yeah, got you back. Good. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. Most people in the field.
Most people in the field are going to get offers of people to volunteer, people who are it's usually going to be women in their 40s, 50s, people who want to be back around horses, haven't been around horses for a while. They can be a tricky group to manage as volunteers. They have expectations, they have needs, they have rules. Most of our young adults in our job training program have been therapied out, like you said, people who have been told, you're not able to do this, you're not good at this, you're not quick at this, there's this wrong with you, that wrong with you. Putting them in a position of power to supervise volunteers.
You put autistic young people in charge of bossy, horsey women?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have this on video?
With the ukulele soundtrack.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really amazing.
So the autists are training the neurotypicals effectively.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good Lord.
And the care that they take, it can be pretty brutal at times.
And I would
yes.
like to come and watch this as a Sophian.
And it may sound cruel, but how cruel is it that, it's just a role reversal, and it's really beautiful. And watching the person who is in charge of training the neurotypical people, watching that kind of brutal supervision soften over time is really special. Really, 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 really special. And it's one of the things I'm quite proud of.
Would you say that's the thing you're the most proud of, this employment step?
I think just developing our staff, period, and staff meaning, including our job training people, has been the thing I'm most proud of. Yeah. Yeah.
And you talked about new locations. I happen to know, because you told me, that your Half Moon Bay, your original location, is about to change in a rather exciting way.
In a really exciting way.
Could you tell us about that, please?
So we have worked a deal in our area of coastal Bay Area, California. There is a subset of the national park system called the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And it's a sum total of, I think, 8 or 9 big pieces of property from Sonoma, which is about 80 miles north of us. This piece of property we're going to talk about is the southernmost part, but it includes the Marin Headlands, which is the north part of the Golden Gate Bridge. It includes a lot of the north coast in Marin County. The Presidio of San Francisco is part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And then this piece of property that we're moving to is called the Rancho Corral del Tierra, and it's 4,200 acres of coastal California.
Can you see the ocean?
And you can. So it's coastal. Montera Mountain, we hiked it. Actually, last week is an 1,800-foot vertical gain to the top with a view of the entire Bay Area, including Mount Tamalpais, Mount Hamilton, the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, and all the way down to Pescadero. If you look on a map, it's some of the most stunning landscape you can ever imagine. And the trails are maintained by the Department of the Interior. There's actually a state park right next door, so it's even more than 4,200 acres worth of trails.
And you can access all this with your autistic clients, with your good Lord.
Yeah. So we're right now the herd is split. We have 6 horses here in Half Moon Bay and 6 in the Rancho Corral del Tierra. And so we do sessions all day, and then we run over and we just and it's mostly the thoroughbreds that are at the rancho right now. getting them out on the trail and just getting used to, there's going to be loose dogs because it's a park. There's going to be mountain bikes, and just exploring trail loops that are going to be appropriate for different clients. We can actually, in about 10 minutes ride from where the horses are, we can be at the local elementary school. So we're looking at engaging programs there. Parents can go for a hike and a picnic while their family members ride. It is, the ability to get out into stunningly beautiful natural spaces is so exciting.
So
Exciting.
This is genius, because obviously for so many of us in the field, the idea of a barn, and the barn has the land that it has, might be large, might be small, but usually the program is contained,
right.
often in an arena, which isn't, ideal because it's a sterile environment. And you are now able to get out into all this public land with your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the thing is, this is Silicon Valley. So real estate is cost prohibitive. And it's, nobody was jumping up and wanting to give us 20 acres. And even if they did, as just maintaining your own trails suddenly takes away so much from your program.
Yeah.
So now somebody else has to manage the trails and maintain them. And we can focus on programs, and we can focus on horse care, and we can focus on just getting people access to this in property that is meant to be shared. And we're bringing a population into the national park that is not traditionally, participated in national parks. So the national park has a feather in their cap that they're reaching out to vulnerable populations that normally wouldn't access the park.
So perhaps
it's really a win-win.
You talk about mentoring. Would you say actually now, would you recommend that people who are running programs reach out to the public recreational land
I think
organizations
so,
in the area and see, can we do our work in these areas? Because that's really where these people need to be, right? Is out in that type of nature. And we know that nature deficit disorder is a thing.
And we know that horses are a part of the American heritage story, a deep, important part. And so integrating horses into public parks and public trail systems is an important way to preserve that history. And we can sell that to communities. We can sell that to the organizations that own the parklands. We can sell that and be able to focus our efforts and our resources in programs. And I think it's really exciting. I think that doing really innovative public and nonprofit partnerships is a way to go. And of course, I learned that from the great David Doyle.
Who we will have on this, if we can persuade him to talk. The man has an allergy to talking. For those who do not know, David Doyle is, and you should tune into the David Doyle is actually the Wizard Merlin disguised as an middle-aged Irishman who runs the extraordinary Liskinnet farm in County Limerick, one of the most extraordinary autism and mental health with horses facilities that exists anywhere in the world. I think we all look up to him, and I'll be definitely just look for where I have him on the podcast. You do want to listen to David Doyle. One of the things which we're often talking about in this walk of life is how important environment is. And of course, riding arenas are often sterile, smell bad. Yes, sometimes if the weather is really bad, okay, then that's where we have to be, but we can bring the forest in perhaps, or put trees in there like we put jumps, or be imaginative about how we use the arena. But one would so much rather not. And, you talk about you've got access to this land, and I can just hear now some people saying, oh, well, but, we're in Europe or wherever, and we don't have access to that. And I would always challenge that, actually. So, for example, where we are in Germany, we don't even own our own place. We're renting boxes. But the land around us, there is free access on all the trails. It doesn't matter who owns it. You can ride across it. You can ride into the forest. So, of course, that's where we do our work. And I'll say to parents, okay, meet me in that car park. I'll be over there with the horses to meet you. And we go to this lovely spring in the forest, or to this lovely little playground we've set up because we hang silk hammocks from the trees or whatever, to think outside of arenas. And the fact that you've now done this in public land, I think is a real inspiration for others to follow, to please think outside the box, think outside the arena and think outside of your own property boundaries. Is there national forest near you? Is there a public park near you with a swing set that you don't have to raise 200,000 to put in because you could just go there and meet the kids and play there with your horse? Or can you use the resources, the outdoor resources that are in the area? And boy, oh boy, are you doing that? I cannot wait to come check it out. Can people, when I first met you all those years ago, you were operating out of a trailer in a very confined riding arena, or riding boarding barn really, which did have access up a very, very steep, very difficult to get up trail to some open hill area. But, most of what was going on was confined to an arena, and then I saw you sort of expand out to a more spacious property, but it was still relying on what that property had within its boundaries. And now it seems you've expanded through just sort of a leap of imagination to completely unlimited, natural, sort of Eden type playground. Is this something we could all do you think?
Yeah. We had been searching for about 2 years, and I was pretty close to a deal on what looked like was going to be a really nice deal. It was part of a sport horse breeding farm, really nice farm, and she wanted to lease us or sell us a portion of it. And she really wanted to make the deal work, and it just wasn't right in my gut, and I couldn't figure out why. And David Joell and his wife Maura were visiting, and I sat him down and I said, I don't know why I'm not feeling so confident about this. And he said, well, I'll tell you why you're not feeling confident about it. You have 140 families on a waiting list for services, and you would be moving to a place that is as big as where you are now. There's no room to grow. And I said, oh, you're right. He said, you need to know exactly what the criteria is for a property, and the property will find you. It's a square peg story, right? I was trying to make an opportunity that we had fit. And instead I needed to reverse that. And I needed to know what the dream was, and then let that property find me. It's a leap of faith that I didn't like taking. I like being in control of things. But I came home from Ireland, and I was waiting for my bags in the airport, and the phone rang. And I had talked about this property that we're moving to a couple of years ago with the woman who owns the lease on it. And we decided that it wasn't private enough. And so we'd given up on it. And she calls me and she says, I know that we talked about Ocean View Farms a couple of years ago, but I can't get Square Peg out of my mind. And it turns out that traditionally everything behind the arena had horses in it, but we haven't had horses there for years. What if we did a custom build out for you? And then you would have all the privacy you need and have all the access to the trails. Would that work? Yeah, that would work. So there you go. That's whether you call that manifesting or just dumb luck. It wasn't until I knew exactly what we wanted in a facility that I was able to find it, or for it to find us.
Dream the dream and let the dream find you.
Yeah.
Words to live by.
Yeah. Yeah. And proved out.
Wow. So if people want to come to Square Peg and be mentored in how to create square pegs, or how to have more square peg than what they already do, can they do that? Can they contact you?
They can. They can. Yeah. It's going to be a little wild and woolly until summer with us, moving and getting reestablished. But we're really hoping by summer that we'll be able to actively mentor people. It's something that gives us a lot of satisfaction. And it feels like that's one of the best ways to send those waves out into the world.
Okay, so we will be putting in the links how to contact you, Joell.
Yeah.
With your permission. And if people would like to go and be mentored by the amazing Joell Dunlap, which I certainly have been, I would recommend it. It seems to get one to rather lovely places. If nothing else, it's a great excuse to go and check out that property. So it's been an amazing story. It's been an honor to talk to you. And as long as I've known you, there were still aspects of the story that were unknown to me and gaps that you filled, which I find fascinating. What would you leave us with? What are your parting words of wisdom for us, Joell Dunlap of Square Peg Foundation? For us in the equine assisted world?
My favorite go-to whenever I am confused by a horse or a family that I'm working with, that I come back to is 3 really simple words. And that's always assume intelligence. And that has guided me through some big decisions. I'll leave that open-ended and for whatever interpretation or far-significant. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I'll try that with my morning affirmations in front of the mirror. Look at myself and go, intelligence. But very practical. Always assume intelligence. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I never met anybody who was, or any other organism that was unintelligent except in my own limited view of them. It was my limited view.
And when I shipped there, I come to much more compassionate decisions, less frustration. Yeah.
Yeah, looking for the beauty of rolling the rock up the hill. Not the F.
Or down.
Yeah, or down. Or the walk down. With the nice sea view.
With the nice sea view.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, Joell.
It's late for you. Thank you for staying up.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, we're on different time zones. We will put links to Square Peg, Damn Fine Hand, Valenza Method, and other resources from this, plus how to contact Joell and get mentored by her and go and check her amazing place out in the links. Until next time, we'll be seeing you in the equine assisted world because it's where we hang out for our sins. Joell, thank you so much. It's been.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Join our website, newtrailslearning.com, to check out our online courses and live workshops in Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Athena. These evidence-based programs have helped children, veterans, and people dealing with trauma around the world. We also offer a horse training program and self-care program for riders on longridehome.com. These include easy-to-do online courses and tutorials that bring you and your horse joy. For an overview of all shows and programs, go to rupertisaacson.com. See you on the next show. And please remember to press subscribe and share.